We are going to make a forest using these Taxodium distichum or swamp cypress, and these are quite large trees. They're almost like anything from 60 centimeter to 1 meter tall, and we use these for making forests. We can plant them in the ground to thicken the trunk and make individual trees, but when they are this stage and the trunks are almost like a small finger thick at the base, and they're only grown in these little pots, but they're nice tall trees and they're ideal for making forests. So let's see what we can do with them. So we begin by taking them out of the pots and putting them into the tray. We can make the groups either in a proper bonsai pot, such as this lovely oval mica pot, or I can plant them in seed trays and let them develop in whatever manner they wish. You see, if you put it in these seed trays, once the roots are established, I can then put it in a proper pot. So let me just show you what I'll do with just this, the ordinary seed trays. But because I've got so many trees, how many? I'll have a quick count. There's 2, 4, 6, 3, 9, 9 and 4, 13. Okay, 13 trees. 13 trees might fit into this tray. So let's not use the finished product, just to show you a variation of what we do. We will do it on the cheap. And when we say we do it on the cheap, really, it's not really doing it on the cheap. It's just that these trees are not ready to put on exhibition or anything. So we're quite happy to just grow them in these trays. And once they are established, we will then put it in the proper bonsai container. So that's not a great big deal. So first thing to do is to take them all out of their pots. I scrape around the base to see if there are any nice surface roots below. These trees, by the way, are very, very vigorous trees. I've seen them grow in warm climates like in Florida, and they become absolutely ginormous trees. They grow at the rate of knots, and they have these lovely knees that stand out of the water, and that's why they're called swamp cypress. They grow in the swamps. And although we're growing them in a group, I think that in about 3 years or so, they'll become so congested, we'll have to separate them. So they'll only be nice for a short while. They are really very vigorous. So although again, they're the same age trees, see, some are thin, some are thick, but for a forest group, this is exactly what we want. We don't want them all the same size. And although they look almost the same height, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them down so that they're all differing heights. Making a forest group is one of the simplest things you can do. We always call it jokingly as arranging flowers. It's like flower arranging exercise. Just put them all together till it looks right. No real technique to it. It's just that the relative positions of the trees should make it look natural and interesting. Normally trees like this, if you make them into individual bonsai, we would just wire it in an S or just grow it big so that they get thick trunks and then train the branches later on. Now, because the root balls are all pretty similar, we need to shave off some of the root from one side if we want to get the trees closer together. And at this time of the year, which is autumn, you see all the leaves are beginning to shed. We can get them closer together. We can even tie them close if you wish. But knowing how vigorous this species is, taking about half the root ball off won't damage the tree at all. They are such vigorous things. So although this tray is about 16 to 18 inches long, and for those of you who work in centimeters, this would be something like 50 centimeter. So it's in such a small tray, I'm able to squeeze a lot of trees together. So I have a quick count again. 3 and 4, 7, 3, 10, 10 and 5, 15 trees. 15 trees in such a small pot. I could even get another 2 in or 4 in. So usually when you make a forest, the more trees you get in, the more interesting it looks. So I'm now going to do this single group one rather than just make it like in some of my other videos. I break them up into 2 subgroups. So let's just do the traditional way of having just one group. Again, the trees should be all slightly different spacings. Certainly not like soldiers on parade as I normally refer to it. And you should be able to see all the trees. Although I'm working from the back, I'm going to turn the tree around from time to time so that you can see it. And just to give you some idea what the overall shape will be, I'm going to trim these down a bit. You can, of course, trim it to whatever height you wish. As I said, these trees, some of them are 1 meter tall, but you don't want them that high. But if I wanted to, I could cut them down to about this height. No harm done. Of course, now that the tree, this variety is shedding its leaves, this swamp cypress is deciduous trees, like the dawn redwood, they're all deciduous. They've all just shed the golden needles. So they will just be bare twigs, but come the spring when they put on the new foliage, the lovely green foliage, beautiful lime green foliage, it will look really beautiful. So I'm not too worried. So it's just the general principle of putting these trees together. Try and put all the trees so that they're fairly straight, and don't let them cross each other. They shouldn't cross. I think you're looking at it from the front. So again, there's a variation. You can either make it splay outwards like a fan shape or put them all straight. This is when you can put it in a fan shape, splaying outwards like this. Many people like it like that. Or you can have them just straight. But whatever you do, it always turns out nice. I think I'll do it slightly fan shape. Or you can have two groups, but I've just done some with two groups, but we will do this as a single group. So each tree should have a single trunk. We don't want too many split or double trunk trees, and the branches should be close to the trunk. And if you are meticulous, as these trees get more mature, you can even go to the extent of wiring the branches downwards. So each tree is like a tiny Christmas tree with the branches hanging down. But this is just showing you how to put these trees together. As simple as that. And I haven't put wire in this case because sometimes when I make a group, I pass wires through the bottom of the pot and tie them in together. But if I just ram the soil tight, really have the soil congested, it shouldn't fall apart. So I'm just going to use some of the old compost. Young trees, they're not very fussy about soil, so I wouldn't worry too much. But don't just use plain mud or just use sand. Our basic compost, as I've always told you, is a mixture of pine bark and peat, and that makes a lovely, lovely mix. Just ram it in tight. Don't worry about ramming the soil tight because the soil always has a spring in it. It'll spring back up. But if you were using like a clay soil, mud, to use a common expression, then that would become caked like cement. But if you use a very open texture of this bark and peat, it does spring back up. So it doesn't hurt to compress it tight. But because this is not a complete composition now, because this is only in its simple training seed tray, I won't bother to finish off with moss. If you want to make it look nice, we always have a ready supply of moss. We have so much moss in the nursery. So rather than spray it to kill the moss off, we use it a lot. People who come on our classes love this moss. I'm not going to put it everywhere, just to give you some idea as to how just applying a little bit of moss changes the whole appearance of the group. So even though this is a humble seed tray, I can make this thing look as if it's been growing here for ages. There you are. I won't take too much of your time. So this is a very simple arrangement of, what did we say, 15 trees. This is 4, 5, 5 and 4 is 9, 9 and 3, 12 and 3, 15 trees in this little tray. So how easy is that? I've been given a challenge to use these deodar cedar. Deodar cedar is not often used in bonsai because they have this weeping habit. But these are not weeping too much. They're pretty straight. So being straight, I thought the best use to make with these trees, apart from doing the traditional S, as you know, I'm very fond of doing the S shape. So if you wire it into an S like that, you get a beautiful S-shaped tree. But rather than just keep doing the same thing, let's use these tall trees to make a forest. So I haven't counted. I never count the trees, as you know. As long as it looks right, that's all that matters. So we just begin by taking them all out of their pots and putting them together and see what the outcome turns out to be. So I haven't ever done this as a race, but I think if given a challenge, I could probably do this group in less than 10 minutes, but that's not the point of this exercise. This exercise is to show you how we can make something nice out of these very straight trees. Usually straight trees in bonsai are not regarded very highly because they don't look that interesting, but they can be made interesting. So let's choose the trees. They're all fairly similar thicknesses. Usually when you make a forest, you do have a variation in sizes. So we have some thick and some thin. But because they're all the same thickness, we will try and find some which are thicker than others so that the thickest one forms the principal tree. So how tall is this? This must be at least 1 meter long. A bit big, but I've got this very large mica oval pot, and they will look quite nice planted up. So they look very stately trees, and just the sort of image you want for making a forest. So preparing the pot, what I normally do, this mica pot has a lot of drainage holes, so I'm just going to put some wires through it, and the wires are used for tying the trees because being so shallow, and this is more or less like the final pot that I'm going to use, I'm going to thread some wires through so that I can tie all the trees together when I've put them into their final positions. So here we go. I've cut little pieces of mesh, and hopefully I think I will probably do another pair of wire. You don't have to tie them in, but I find that they just keep the trees more stable if they're tied in. So keep the wires outside like that. And now we will start by putting the trees together. So if they're tall and straight, that's what we really need. And I haven't teased the root balls yet. When you make a group, especially if they're tall trees, it's quite a job keeping them upright. And you really need the help of several assistants to hold the trees up while you're doing it. But since I'm performing single-handedly, let's see what happens. You don't want the branches too long. In a forest, when trees are growing close together, the branches tend to be very close. So we trim the branches back close. Also, we trim the branches which are low down so that we show the trunk. So that is the shape of each of the trees. I will turn it around after I've trimmed it to show you what it looks from this side as well. This is just 3 trees. Just hold it temporarily like that. Up. They're very tall. Normally I use the cedar of Lebanon, which has much tighter foliage. And that's why I said the cedar, the deodar cedar or the Himalaya cedar is not such a good species to work with, but nevertheless, as I say, you can make bonsai out of anything. Oops. Because I'm working single-handedly, I'm just going to let them lie down for a moment. Let me prepare the trees first, and then I'll put them together. Tall A shape. Now with a tree like this branch coming out to the side, you don't really want it in a forest. So cut that off. And because we don't want all the trees the same height, we will cut some short. Remember, you've always got to be prepared to cut. If you're not prepared to cut, then you're not going to make much progress. You see how tight the root balls are? I think I should tease it a bit so that the roots can spread more easily. So this is a variation in height. That's a shorter one. As I said, I haven't counted the number of trees yet. I'm just putting as many as will fit this pot. I'm doing this deliberately because I want to debunk this traditional view of having the odd and even numbers. It's okay as long as the numbers are few, like less than 9 or 7 where the eye can assimilate. But I really don't think the numbers in a group matter at all. It's the final effect which is important. This is a bit floppy, so I'm not going to use this one, so I'll discard this one. I've got enough trees, so let's put them up together and see what they look like. And this pot, although it is long and narrow, I'll just have a quick count of the trees. And at a quick count, I've got 3 and 4, 7, and 3, 10 trees. 10 trees. It can take many more. But let's see, I may end up with 10. Okay, I'll deliberately make 10. Rather than just go for a 9 or a 11, I'll make 10. You must be having a good laugh that I'm struggling to put these trees upright, but this is a sort of situation where you would find yourself in. If you're working on your own, not everyone has assistants hanging about helping you, but if you are working on your own, this is what you would have to face, isn't it? Trying to prop the trees up yourself with no other help. But what I will do now, I'm going to put soil into the pot to stand the trees up. Right, I've come across a very interesting situation now, and you must be wondering what is going through my mind. Frankly, this looks a mess. It looks a mess, really looks a mess. But out of the mess, we will create something nice. So it's all part of the creative process. The final product doesn't just end up first go. You have to have several goes at it to make it look nice. Now, what is wrong with this group? It is too congested. You can't see all the individual trees. So whereas in some species like the maples, you can plant them very close together, I feel that with this cedar group, the trees being planted close together looks a mess. So, besides, I've got this very large pot, so why should I waste all the space in this pot? I'm going to space the trees out much more and then see what happens. Now let me just move the trees around and see what the effect will be if I space it further apart. So the way I'm trying to prop them up is just putting soil, and by propping them up with soil, I will be able to work single-handedly. So here we are from a very congested group where we put the trees really close together. They were all about 1 inch or ½ inch close to each other. That didn't seem to work because we couldn't see the individual trees and it was looking very messy. But by spacing it much wider, you can see how much more pleasant the entire group looks like. It may be a bit too uniform to my liking, but because there is spacing at the back, they're all the uniform spacing with respect to each other. But when you view it from the front, these 3 trees look very close together. And that looks nice. And then this spacing is much further apart. So there is a variation in spacing. So you can always just play around with it till it looks right. But this to me looks right. So I will probably settle for this. It's not too bad. So what I will now do is tie the trees in, because I'm going to keep this group in case anyone wants to have it. I will keep it, and I will just secure the trees by looping the wire around once, but I've got to be careful it doesn't bite in during the year. It's just to keep it from being knocked over. So all these wires are going to be looped around the tree. So this is the purpose of putting those pairs of wires you saw me put round when I started making the group. So this one here. Every single tree is going to be secured in this fashion. Go around the tree once. If you didn't remove it after about a year, it'll swell and make it look thick and ugly. So, but within a year, the tree should have meshed together. So it will have served its purpose. So now we've got all the trees tied up. And now I'll just firm the soil together. You notice that again I'm not using the Bonsai compost with a lot of grit. This is just the ordinary compost that we use for potting our young seedlings, which is a mixture of sphagnum moss, peat, and pine bark. This is our standard compost which my compost maker makes for me. firming it in, filling all the spaces. I find that a lot of people never firm the soil in. And if you don't firm the soil in, the roots don't get a chance to make contact with soil. So always get into this habit of firming it in. Some people use chopsticks for doing it, but I don't think chopsticks would be necessary with this one. I'm just firming it with my fingers really firm. Between each plant, there's usually a lot of space, air space. Let me turn the group around. There is a back and a front to this tree. Let me just step in the front and have a look so that I'm getting a view that you view. I think this is quite nice as a front. So make sure that the trees are all fairly straight and not crossing each other. No crossing trees. Slight splaying out at the end is useful. And then I will cut some of the unwanted branches. So branches which are low down we don't usually require. Branches at the back also we don't require. And as these branches mature, you can wire them. So each tree is a tall A-frame. So the overall shape is still broadly conical, because that's the most restful appearance that you can get. Let's turn it around. This is the back side. So this shouldn't have taken very long, so it's a very quick procedure. And because it's almost complete, I might as well dress it up with a bit of moss. As I said, we have a lot of moss on the nursery. And it will just give it a more finished appearance. Even before exhibitions in Japan and China, people go and gather the moss just to give like a top dressing. So if you're a makeup artist, this is the sort of thing makeup artists would do. And I did show you on another video about making groups. You can put little pieces of rock and make it look more authentic, because in forests you will find a bit of rock growing, or the trees growing out of rocks, so that makes it look natural. We have a lot of moss that grows on the nursery, on the paths. So this is not specially grown. I'm always fascinated when people sell moss. I've come across one or two sites where they're actually selling moss seeds or moss spore. I think it works if you can't get it, but if you look carefully around your premises, if you have a garden or a house, then they would grow on the paths. If you live in a balcony, sometimes I've seen moss growing on balcony floors. You can also get moss growing, so moss just grows naturally. Of course, if you keep watering your bonsais, the moss grows naturally. But rather than have to wait, we can get this instant effect by planting moss. The only annoying thing with moss is that come the spring, when the birds are building their nests, they dig all the moss up because they're looking for worms and caterpillars that hide in the soil. I think this is the rear. The front is better this side. There's always one side that is better than the other. And again, I haven't counted the trees. I will count it now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 3, 9. Okay. 3, 6, 9. It's turned out 9 trees. But I'm sure that if I had put one more tree to make it 10 trees, or removed one to make it 8, it still wouldn't detract from the beauty of the group. So this just shows that this obsession with the numbers in the group is not really such a valid thing. So this is just a very, very simple thing made literally in a few minutes, and which is within the ability of almost anyone, but it's getting the plants. If you look carefully in nurseries, you will find material like this. But of course, as a commercial nursery, we sell plants like this for making forests. And this is something that people are very fond of doing when they come on our workshops. So this is an example of making a forest with deodar cedar, which is a difficult variety. So in this series, we've made a maple group, then Swamp Cypress group, we've made a common juniper group, and then finally deodar cedar. And the varieties you can use for making the forests or groups is almost limitless. You can use field maple, you can use, I've not seen box trees, you can use privet, quite thick trunk privets. You can use larch, of course. Yew trees can also be used. So you can virtually use anything, but the essence of the forest is that they are straight trees. So there you are. We've given you another example of a forest very simply made.